You probably think you can spot a scam from a mile away. Avoiding small-time con artists and fraudsters comes naturally to most of us nowadays. However, these schemes were so ingenious, they earned the criminals who masterminded them millions of dollars, and you may have struggled to spot them. Here are 5 of the most successful scams in history. Number 1. The Portugal Banknote Affair. Like many of the best scams out there, the Portugal Banknote Affair relied more upon the confidence of the scammer and the carelessness of the victim than any complicated economic strategy. The scheme was invented by Alves dos Reis, a Portuguese con artist who managed to scam the Bank of Portugal out of millions. Looking to make his fortune, Reis emigrated to Portuguese Angola in 1916, forging himself a diploma from Oxford University's fictional Polytechnic School of Engineering before he left. Marketing himself as an expert in engineering, mathematics, and geology, he journeyed to the Portuguese colony to start a new life. After 6 years in Angola, not content with his earnings, Reis was thrown in jail after buying a railway company with forged checks. During his short time in prison, he hatched a new plan that would finally make him millions. Using a mixture of his confidence, his carefully nurtured public image, forged documents, and the lack of focus of a few bank employees, Reis managed to convince a British-based company to print 100 million unauthorized Portuguese escudos. Reis relied on his public image to build confidence in his victims. He invested huge amounts of money into local corporations and development plans, which eventually led him to being hailed as a hero in Angola. He started his own bank and attempted to transition away from crime. Despite this, his attempts to become more legitimate ultimately led to his downfall. Reports of suspicious banknotes had risen by 1925, and people began to ask how Reis could charge such low interest rates and remain profitable. Ultimately, investigations into his finances led to the discovery of hundreds of banknotes with duplicate serial numbers, and his whole initial scam was exposed. Reis spent 20 years in prison until his release in 1945. Number 2. The Bre-X Gold Mine Scam. Bre-X was a minerals company founded in 1989 that had an uneventful first few years, not making a profit until 1993. Their first real earnings came after the company purchased a plot of land in the middle of the Indonesian jungle after geologist John Felderhoff advised of the purchase. After the purchase, Filipino geologist and project manager Michael de Guzman estimated that the site contained 2 million troy ounces of gold. Over the next few years, estimates of the value of the land kept creeping up and up. Eventually, in 1997, it was estimated to hold 70 million ounces of gold.
Question after question from the auditor had an answer after answer from the Guzman. Everything seemed to have an explanation.
As a result, stock prices in Bre-X grew massively, and other minerals companies attempted failed takeovers of the company. Excitement over the site grew to the point that the Indonesian president even got involved, stating that a small company like Bre-X should share the site with others. As time went on, and many of the shareholders of Bre-X made a lot of money, not a single gram of gold had been mined from the site.
A fire at the mining facility happened and destroyed all of the records and the drill hole samples, making them unrecognizable and impossible to audit.
Eventually, in 1997, the fraud was exposed when the Bre-X geologist Michael de Guzman reportedly committed suicide by jumping from a helicopter. A week later, core samples taken by other companies showed insignificant amounts of gold at the site. All hell broke loose as the stock value crashed and a massive sell-off of shares ensued. It was finally revealed that the original ore samples had been salted with gold dust.
But it's amazing how little gold dust can just change everything.
One hole even contained shaved-off gold from jewelry, probably from de Guzman's ring. The entire gold mine had been completely fabricated, and millions of dollars of investment disappeared overnight. Number 3. The original Ponzi Scheme. You've probably heard of the term Ponzi Scheme, but you may not have known that it is named after its infamous Italian inventor Charles Ponzi. Born in Italy in 1882, Ponzi thought up a simple yet effective way of tricking willing investors out of their money. His scheme was simple. Ponzi would attract investors by promising them high returns with little or no risk. After his investors gave him money, he would pay them initially with good returns on their investment, telling them the profits originated from a legitimate business. However, Ponzi would simply pay his later investors using investments from earlier investors. He was able to maintain this illusion of a sustainable business as long as new investors contributed new funds. Often in a Ponzi scheme, the only source of income is the investors themselves, and the actual business doesn't even exist. During the height of his success, Ponzi was making $250,000 a day. His scheme was, of course, eventually found out. His scam brought down several banks and wiped out the assets of most of his investors. He spent over 10 years in prison for his crimes. Number 4. Evart Krueger. A controversial choice, Evart Krueger is seen as both a financial genius and nothing more than a common crook. During his long and complicated career, some estimate Krueger was able to con over $100 million illegally from his victims. To the public, the Swedish businessman was simply known as the Match King, controlling between 2/3 and 3/4 of global match production. However, he was also involved in numerous forms of illegal activity. His career was littered with dishonesty and forgery. He reportedly made a copy of the finance ministry's official signature, who gave him his very first loan for his match monopoly, just in case he needed it later on. He also kept forged Italian bonds in a safe for years in case he ever needed to attempt to cash them in. It is unknown just how many dishonest and illegal activities Krueger was involved in throughout his long career, as he regularly walked the line between legitimate and illegal. He avoided legal issues until his suicide in 1932, which caused what is known as the Krueger crash. An economic crash hit the USA and Sweden after his death, when much of the illegal activity and forged documents were revealed. It turned out that 250 of the $630 million Krueger's company claimed to have in assets were non-existent. Number 5. Emmanuel Uday. In one of the craziest scams in history, Nigerian banker Emmanuel Uday managed to scam a Brazilian investor out of $242 million. Between 1995 and 1998, Nelson Sakaguchi, the director of Banco Noroeste in Sao Paulo, invested huge amounts of money into a brand new airport set to be built in Abuja, the capital of Nigeria. Uday was able to use his confidence and charisma to impersonate the governor of the Central Bank of Nigeria, as well as his contacts and accomplices in Nigeria. This scam was finally uncovered after several years when the Spanish Banco Santander attempted to take over Sakaguchi's Brazilian bank, discovering that half of their capital was sitting in the Cayman Islands unmonitored. For obvious reasons, this stalled the purchase while it was investigated. Of course, Uday's entire scheme was uncovered, leading to criminal investigations in Brazil, UK, Nigeria, Switzerland, and the United States. Uday and his accomplices were sentenced to 29 years in jail collectively, and all of their assets were confiscated. He was released from prison in 2006, but was back in prison on murder and terrorism charges in 2016 after reportedly leading an attack on a town in southeast Nigeria. Some people never learn. Thanks for watching this episode of Crime 101. Be sure to subscribe for more.